Okay,
I do
how
want to
many
ask.
have watched Netflix in the last 7 days? Last 7 days, half. Okay.
You guys
We
all
got room to
paying
grow.
or sharing passwords?
That's it. None of that. Thank you, Alf. Thank you, bro.
How many people have watched a Netflix original movie in the last 7 days?
War Machine.
Smaller group. Let's start there.
Okay.
Movies. You've been doing your own movies for a couple years. You're ramping up now. I read you're going to spend about $400 million on 4 movies that are coming out this year,
Okay.
give or take.
You can never believe what you read, but go on.
Sometimes. Why are you getting into movies now? Why'd you start with TV and then get into movies? And what's different about movies and TV for you guys?
So for a long time, we only had other people's shows that they had launched, like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, great shows, but we were not the originating network. And then we started to expand into original series, of course, first with House of Cards and continuing to grow now with a new show, Glow, in another month. And along the way, we realized TV shows and movies are actually very similar in many ways. Their difference is the theatrical distribution, but in terms of the entertainment, and that we should feel comfortable getting into original movies and doing those in a big way. And so that's what we're underway.
So I know it's not easy, but it seemed like getting into TV shows was pretty easy for you guys. You threw a bunch of money at some stuff and a bunch of things seemed to be popular. The people seem to like them. We never know the real numbers. They seem critically acclaimed. Movies does not seem like it's had the same trajectory for you. In a shareholder letter recently, you said, actually, some of our movies have not worked out well. You even named one. You normally never say something didn't work out. So why is the learning curve different for you with movies?
Well, I think if you have the perspective that we're just throwing money at things and then some of them work, it probably does seem
a gross
mysterious.
bloggy term.
But I don't know that movies are that much harder. We just have chosen first to do serialized entertainment because you get into a show and then you get excited and addicted by it. And binge viewing is a very novel thing that we pioneered, and there's no movie equivalent. So you watch a movie in the middle of the night, that's great,
Right.
It's basic on demand. But think for the original shows, the first series we did, things like Breaking Bad, it was transformative to be able to go back to the beginning and binge view it. So we concentrated on where we had the most competitive advantage, that's binge viewing, things that we're binging. And then second is movies, where you don't get the binge view aspect, but you can watch them anytime.
So the kind of movies you're making right now seem to be this middle ground. Hollywood does blockbusters, usually with the superhero, and they do some very cheap things, like Get Out. You're in this middle ground, it looks like. You're spending around $100 million a movie. Sometimes it has a star like Brad Pitt in it. It's the kind of movies that Hollywood doesn't seem to be making right now. Are you making those movies intentionally because that's open to you?
I would say we're making,
because they're not doing it.
We've got movies like Siege of Jadotville that were much smaller and have been very popular. And we've got movies at the high end like Bright coming out in the winter with Will Smith. That's a really big budget. We're talking about The Irishman, trying to figure that one out. Martin Scorsese, which would be out in 2 years, which would be a really big movie. So I would say we're willing to play both at the high end, the middle, the low end. We buy lots of great films out of Sundance.
Right, but you're not making tentpole movies, right? Yet. Is that an ambition? Do you think that one day you're going to be making,
Well, it's a
Spider-Man's
tentpole that
X-Men?
has tremendous commercial success. So, you're thinking about it in budget terms, but that doesn't correlate to reception always. So we want films that everybody wants to watch, that become cultural moments. And that's what you might call a tentpole. And maybe it has a $50 million budget or a $5 million or a $100 million.
And then meanwhile, what do you tell directors who make movies in Hollywood who still have an expectation or hope that they're seen on a big screen? I know that technically you can see most of these movies on a screen somewhere in America so they can qualify for an award. But you hear directors saying, boy, I really wish people watched this thing on a big screen before they watched it at home.
Yeah, we're in a transition period where the movie theater chains around the world are not willing to allow consumers to choose, but eventually they will. And so big movies will come out and they'll be on Netflix and on Amazon and on many other services, and also in the movie theaters. And if you want a communal experience with a bunch of friends, you would go out to the theater like you go out to a restaurant, even though you know how to cook. So it's like not that dramatic.
You know how to use Seamless.
There we go. So, the movie theaters have had this exclusive windowing system, and that's breaking down. And
Do you think it's inevitable that breaks down?
Absolutely. Yeah. Ultimately, consumer choice is a very powerful force. And so you'll be able to watch movies either at home or in the movie theater. But for Netflix, again, we're mostly focused on how do we do entertainment that you feel like you got to watch and, stay up late at night.
Can we pull back a bit? You guys started streaming just about 10 years ago.
Yep.
So prior to that, you were sending out movies on DVD.
Licking a lot of envelopes.
Licking a lot of envelopes. When you started 10 years, and now you're at 100 million subs, you're in almost every country in the world.
Yep.
How far did you project out? Did you say, I think in 10 years we're going to be at 100 million subs and we'll be in every country in the world, basically outside of China? Or how much of this did you see coming?
The beautiful thing about Excel is you can do fill right. So you put a growth rate in there and you go fill right. And then you see, wow, those are big numbers. But it's not more planful than that.
How much? So, it's good.
The truth.
So there's no point in me asking about your 10-year plan, but what is that experience of growing over those 10 years and basically creating a new kind of business? How does that inform how you're thinking about the next year or 2 years?
What we're really focused on is how do we push the creative boundaries and doing shows that bring people together, are exciting. Sometimes they polarize people. And again, this is a fairly US centric audience, but most of our growth now is international. We're about 50-50 in terms of memberships. And if you look at the big internet companies like YouTube and Facebook, they're 85% international and 15% domestic. So we're producing more and more titles, again, in France, in Germany, in India, in Japan. And so that's the big effort, which is, it's challenging to build great shows around the world.
You're spending a lot of time and money and effort in India.
Yep.
Amazon is also doing the same thing. Are those two things connected?
No, I would say, Amazon and us are two drops of water in an ocean. Most viewing, YouTube viewing is probably 100 times us in India. YouTube is incredibly popular, and Hotstar and many other services. So both Amazon and us have, little footholds, and that's exciting. In other markets like the US, we're both very strong. So it varies all over the world.
When you guys launched, you did a big international announcement about a year and a half ago at CES. Right. You did basically, again, everywhere except, North Korea and China. And everyone said, when are you going to get to China? And you said, we think we're going to get there. We're working with them. Maybe a year later, you said, actually, China's not going to happen. What happened, and what did you get wrong, or what changed?
Well, we've always hoped to be able to operate our service everywhere in the world, but it became increasingly clear to us that that was going to be difficult for regulatory, governmental reasons in China.
But did something change on the Chinese end, or did you guys assess it wrong going
I think
in?
we probably assessed it wrong. We had our natural optimism, which slowly got beat down. Then we said, look, we got the whole rest of the world, let's focus on that, and let's just take our content and license it to Baidu, to Tencent, to Ali.
How good are you guys about saying we got this wrong? With Quickster, right, there was a period where...
We get a lot wrong, so we got a lot of practice.
You got that one wrong, and then you said we got it wrong after a while.
Yeah.
In China, it's not as consequential. Does it get easier or harder as you grow and get bigger and become more successful to go, oh, this isn't working, we got to pull the plug quickly, or we're going to make this work?
It's a small manifestation of our commitment internally to honesty with each other between the employees. So, no, we call things failures all the time and we deal with it. And so then, of course, externally, we want to be consistent with how we act internally.
I've interviewed you a bunch. There are a bunch of questions that when I poll people, I say, what do you want to hear?
Yeah.
They're the questions I've asked you before.
Okay.
I figure I should
So
ask
I won't roll my eyes. Go on.
We'll do the speed round.
Okay.
Why aren't you doing sports? When are you going to do sports?
Sports is really good in the moment, so you want to watch the game, but the afterlife of a given show is quite small, and that's different. We talked about binge viewing, of how it's a transformative experience. It's hard to transform sports with the internet. You can carry it over the internet, but what does that do for you? So think of it as the internet doesn't yet add much value to the sports experience.
But you've got people paying a lot of money, you know exactly who they are. You can now afford expensive sports rights. Why not do it anyway?
Our customers watch lots of other video. They watch videos on YouTube. We're not trying to replace that. They're going to watch videos on sports, MLB.TV, et cetera. So we're not trying to meet all needs. So Amazon's business strategy is super broad, meet all needs. The stuff that'll be in Prime in 5 or 10 years will be amazing, right? And so we can't try to be them. We're never going to be as good as them at what they're trying to be. What we can be is the emotional connection brand, like HBO or Netflix. So think of it as they're trying to be Walmart, we're trying to be Starbucks. So super focused on one thing that people are very passionate about.